Hey, welcome back to Kotlin Conversations, where we're having conversations with just a few of the amazing speakers here at Kotlin Conf 2023. My name is Huyen Tuet Dao, and I have the pleasure of speaking with...
Hi folks, I'm Vinay, and I work at Airbnb.
Vinay, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. Vinay literally just hopped off the stage giving his talk here at Kotlin Conf and then came to speak with us. So thank you so much.
Of course, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. I know Vinay is an Android GDE extraordinaire and has, if you're an Android dev, you've probably seen him on the live stream a few times around different events, talking about his great work at Airbnb. But just in general, I kind of spoiled a little bit. You work at Airbnb, but kind of tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you got started in Kotlin.
Awesome. So I primarily work on a team that maintains Airbnb's UI infrastructure and design system. Mm-hmm. And our goal is very simple. We want to make sure that front-end engineering at Airbnb is efficient as it can be. Mm-hmm. And so I spend most of my time dealing with UI stuff for what it's worth. And so whether it's infrastructure needed for component development, screenshot testing, showcase, which is what I spoke about today, and maintaining infrastructure like that is what I spend most of my day on.
And I imagine that kind of, I think that we work on, I think both of us have experience working on different kinds of apps, and of course, depending on the scale of your app, how many users you have, the kind of company you have, and whether you have a design system or not. I'm also a UI person. I identify as a UI person, so I totally feel that. And I just to kind of touch on Showcase a little bit, in terms of app development, and again, kind of being at a company with a very I presume a very established design system, there can be challenges, right, to kind of both, honoring that design system, but also good engineering practices. Is that where kind of Showcase came out of?
Sort of. So I think the main challenge that we were trying to solve with Showcase is that these declarative systems force you to create reusable components and they promote the idea. Mm-hmm. But people won't reuse it if they don't know about the existence of these components. Mm-hmm. And amplify this to the fact that there are maybe 100 engineers working on an Android app at so many companies across the board. Mm-hmm. And so that means that there are hundreds of components being created on maybe a monthly basis, if not more. And so if you really want people to reuse it, you want to make sure that people are aware about its existence, and whatever tooling can aid to that cause, we need to build that. And Showcase is one of the tools that we've built to help with that.
And I would say that even as being on teams of more 10 to 5 people, we also somehow generate a massive amount of components. Either just from people working on different things and kind of, I guess, I forget the phrase, but kind of co-create different things. And you're right, kind of manage that, especially with Compose, I think for sure. And I think that was very interesting because Jetpack Compose, of course, is the Kotlin-based modern UI toolkit that we use. And previously we had an XML-based system. And I think what for me was very interesting when Compose came out was that because it's more declarative, it's more codey, it doesn't feel like there's a very strong division, because before when we had just XML files, they're all right there kind of, divided up. You can just, scan, the XML files, but it's a little bit different, as you said, with these more modern, nominally better engineered solutions.
I think the other side to this is that when you look at what is needed to create a custom component, all you need is a Kotlin function.
Yeah.
And so there are no barriers to entry for someone to knock themselves out.
Right.
And when you compare to the XML, the classic Android world, I had to basically plan my day if I decided to write a custom component.
Yeah, this is, yes, confirm.
So it's a lot easier to build that now. That means that people don't think twice before adding a new component to your code base.
That's right.
And so that's amazing on one side, that we've removed barriers to entry and think people can express themselves and designers can express themselves because we can build those components. Mm-hmm. But also how many components, right? How many components do you need? And if people are creating these components, we need tooling so that everyone is being sensible about adding these components. Mm-hmm. And often the problem is that people just don't know about a component. I think there's one more side to this, which is previously, whenever you needed to make some small changes, people would create a new component altogether.
Yeah.
With Compose, things are so much more expressive. And also there are slot APIs.
Yeah.
And so instead of creating a new component, you basically expose it as a slot, and you can pass anything else really in that slot. Mm-hmm. And that way you're avoiding creation of new components and reusing smaller pieces to create higher level components. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, there are a lot of factors going on essentially when it comes to Compose and UI systems and design systems. And we're still figuring it out. Like, it's still early days. Like, I don't think it's a solved problem.
Yeah.
I think we're just starting things out now. And hopefully the next time I'm here, I will have something more concrete to share and hopefully I've solved this problem.
But I think that's an excellent point. I think that's what's exciting and also scary about Compose is that, with the old system of XML views, we had, almost a decade of everyone tried different things. They tried and true or less so practices, right? Everyone kind of more or less settled into some kind of steady state of, okay, this is vaguely working, this is vaguely maintainable. But now, as you said, the way that we write UI and the possibilities are much more broad, but with great power comes great responsibility, some kind of pop culture reference like that. And yeah, we haven't quite figured it out yet. And I think that's really exciting. So, I mean, I guess in the vein of trying to solve this problem at Airbnb, and just to kind of give a little teaser for your talk, let's get into details. What is Showcase and how does it help you solve this problem of the kind of like, let's make a new composable for this that is right. Both in a bad way, good way, easy.
Right. So Compose has the idea of creating preview functions. And what preview functions are, they are basically wrapper functions around your component with mock data so that you can visualize the components you've created. But they operate at the file level. And what I mean by that is that if you've created a preview function, you can only view it on the file that's currently open in your IDE. But it at least inculcates good practice in engineers where people are creating these previews. Now, we thought that it would be amazing if we can somehow aggregate all the previews in our code base and show it in some sort of a component browser without actually changing what our existing workflow is. So creating previews is second nature to us because Compose promotes that idea. And we don't want the system, we don't want to work for the system. We want the system to be working for us.
Right, exactly.
And because this behavior was already inculcated, we wanted to leverage it. And what Showcase does is it's capable of collecting all the previews from your code base and showing it in a nice and easy component browser that anyone can use. It's going to categorize the components based on the groups that you configured, and everything is configurable. So you can change things to your liking if you would like, essentially. And so this is step one. In order to create this browser, we first need to collect all that data. And we realized that this data was actually more valuable than just the browser itself. And so we also expose the APIs for anyone that does not care about the browser, or maybe they use both, to also get access to all the previews, all the colors, all the typography elements in your code base. And then you can do all sorts of wonderful things with it. As an example, we decided to take all our previews and screenshot test all of them.
Yeah.
And the screenshot test is also auto-generated. And that's part of Showcase itself. And we write a paparazzi test, generate a paparazzi test rather. And so with 3 lines of code, I basically have a component browser. And I also have the ability to take screenshots of all my previews. And this is very powerful. Now, every team is separately doing this. There's no rocket science in this. But we figured that it would be valuable if someone just created this for the community. And everyone just uses it and contributes to it. And that's the whole idea behind Showcase.
Yeah, and again, kind of going back to the idea that this is, again, the community. And I feel like we often in the Android community talk about this, how important open source and sharing conventions and kind of sharing, kind of nascent solutions to problems like this are very important. So that's really cool. And in terms of adoption, how big is your team? And I guess in terms of Showcase and that's a lot of, your team's quite big, isn't it? Sorry, I asked the question, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think my team, my immediate team only has 3 other Android engineers, but we have people on other platforms.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, it always depends on your company in terms of kind of the coherence or ability to communicate between. So were there any challenges in kind of starting this new project, starting this new tool and having it be adopted, or was it pretty, everyone was on board?
Yeah, so I think the timing might have sort of helped me. And that's because I created Showcase back in 2020. So that's when Jetpack Compose was pre-alpha.
Yeah.
Not even alpha, pre-alpha, dev preview days.
Yeah.
And that was primarily because I was confident if I don't create this, someone else is going to do it anyway. And I was just entering the ground floor of Compose infrastructure. And since then, so many people have built such cool stuff related to Compose.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I had less pushback, because everyone was figuring it out. And the bet I was taking was one, we'll move to Compose, which we ended up doing. And two, whenever we do move to Compose, this is going to be core to our infrastructure and we'll save time later on. They were bets, and I'll be honest about that. But thankfully, it played out in the way we were hoping it would play out.
Yeah.
And now Compose is like a very important part of our Android story. Like we've made huge investments in making sure that we are adopting it across the board.
Yeah, and I especially feel like for an app that has as many users as you do, kind of taking the time to actually make sure that the tooling and the processes are there, because I mean it's always about maintainability and scalability and making sure that your app is has good uptime. So tooling becomes even more important.
Absolutely.
So that it's great to have that as well, because I'm sure that there are many other places, whether they have complex, sophisticated design systems or not, are going through the same problems. To kind of, and I think something that's really interesting is, the interaction often of engineers with design and product. Have design and product, have you found a way that Showcase might help interactions with them? Because obviously you're creating a catalog of the visual components, and that seems like it could only, be an asset to product. Have you found that at all, or have
Absolutely.
They engaged? Really?
So we took that a step further, because the Showcase component browser itself, like it's limited to an Android device. But we have the ability to take screenshots. And so as part of that screenshot testing infrastructure, which also uses Showcase, by the way, we basically create a JSON blob, pipe it on an S3 bucket. And then we have a web app that picks that up. And we also have a web browser with all components across all platforms. And the reason we really needed that was for our counterparts. So that people that don't have Android devices, that aren't developers, they can still view all the arsenal of components that we have in our code base on iOS, on web, and on Android. And we also try to link them using common IDs, so that for the same component, this is what it looks like across each platform. And my colleagues have done a phenomenal job in maintaining that system.
That's awesome. So now, you started with, a tool for Android very specifically, and just a very specific Android engineer problem, right? Of like kind of not necessarily repetitive code, but just like a problem of scaling and volume and trying to keep it under control. But now you actually have a very valuable tool at the higher level for product and design systems. Has that changed at all, like how you work with your designers and product, or is it just more like a nice tool that can help keep everyone on the same page?
I think the desire is to make sure that it's a part of everyone's workflow and everyone is using it.
Yeah.
We're still in the early days of that, and so we need to see how it plays out. But that's certainly the ambition that we have, that people are we get data about what is being used, and so we aggregate more information also about how components are being used and what sort of usage we see. Yeah. What are the style variants associated with the component? How many of those are being used, as an example, and then also the discoverability aspect, so that people are aware that this exists and maybe it's not as valuable to recreate something very similar, or maybe you have a pressing deadline and you have this slightly modified component available, but that does the job and lets you ship, and maybe that's the trade-off that is more valuable to you. And so making sure that the data is all there and available for someone to make those decisions is what our goal is. We don't want to always prescribe decisions, because there are two sides to it, right? One side is creativity. The other side is reusability. Yeah. And how do you make sure that you are still being creative and not restricting people behind because you have a design system? So it's always a trade-off. I don't think I have a single answer on which side I would choose. It just matters on context. So
no. So do you have to? I mean, is it more just like, as you're working with your engineers, more just like, hey, is it more of an informal, hey, you should be, checking Showcase, check the catalog. Is there something that is worth it for you? Or is it kind of even a formal something you can automate? Like, hey, I don't know, some kind of like lint check. We're like, oh, by the way, something very similar is already in. Is it that kind of level of like rigidness? Or do you think it's just more like, hey, letting people be aware, informing the team, and kind of just training people, hey, this is something that is a tool for you that you should be using before even typing one line of code?
Right. So screenshot testing is really critical to us. And our entire screenshot testing infra is dependent on Showcase. And I think that was baked into our culture even in the old world, because we always had screenshot tests even with the view system. And so I feel like I had that advantage there where people were bought into the idea of screenshot testing, and we heavily use it. And we've used it for a very long time. And so when you're creating a new module to add a new component, we have strict checks in place that ensures that you need previews, one, and if you're creating preview, they also use Showcase for it. And so we've enforced that because we know we need protection against regressions. And the engineers also want that. Like, they want to make sure that that's happening because we account for Showcase previews as screenshots in our code coverage. And so if there's not enough code coverage, you will be flagged on your PR saying that, hey, it's below the level that we need. And so that's a way to make sure that you are keeping up with our quality bar.
Yeah, so again, like just making automated processes and just kind of putting accountability kind of automatically in the system rather than relying on.
So I think one of our mantras is basically enforcement over best practices, because best practices don't go that far, and we want to enforce wherever possible.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, because even if everyone has best intentions, as you said, pressure, time crunches, some of that tends to slip a little bit, and then it's easy to continue to let it slip because, oh, I have a deadline, oh, we have a release, oh, something has happened, oh, there's a hot fix or something. So I think that it does sound a little harsh, but that is true that having, again, these tools is a way of accountability and not just like utility and like, cleanliness, but, again, like making sure that we're all accountable and kind of approaching engineering code base in a consistent and hopefully kind of coherent way. I kind of wanted to jump to something a little more technical. So you were using KSP in Showcase?
We use both, actually.
You use both? Okay, yeah. Can you tell a little bit about that story? Because, this is not really my forte. I am just a UI person, not really. But I mean, I know that throughout the community, there's been a lot of kind of back and forth a lot of times about the performance issues with Capt, and now we have KSP, which I think promises to be really good, but it's still, it's not as widely supported. I've been on projects where we've had to use both. Can you talk a little bit about that story?
Right.
Why you decided to go ahead and actually bring in KSP as well, and just tell us about that.
Right. So Showcase started with Capt, obviously, because of the timing of when it was built, which is 2020, and KSP was still being discussed. And over time, we leveraged Room X compiler, X processor library.
Really?
Which is basically an abstraction between Capt and KSP.
Yeah.
And my colleague Eli Hart, who is a phenomenal engineer, he added that integration essentially that made us capable to support both Capt and KSP as part of this library. And props to the Room team for open sourcing that library, because it would have been a very hard problem to support two different annotation processors simultaneously without the abstractions available. The reason why we wanted to do that was because build times had been an issue for us for a very long time. And all the profiles that we ran that use KSP were meaningfully faster. Now, one of the challenges is that all your annotation processors need to be in KSP in order to truly get the advantages of it. And so, again, my colleague Eli Hart took this mammoth task of converting all the annotation processors, and we have maybe 5 or 6. Like, we heavily leverage annotation processing and code generation for all sorts of things in our code base. And so converting all of that was his passion and job, and that's what he did. And we're certainly reaping the benefits. Like, we've certainly seen build time improvements and meaningful improvements.
So I know Eli, shout out to Eli, you're awesome, dude. So kind of take it from, take it from the source. So, I mean, what's the goal as well? I mean, obviously, like it seems like the KSP is the ideal, but the practicality is now just to live with both. What do you see in terms of like a time frame or roadmap to when, I mean, is there a day soon when, all of Eli's good work is kind of, put aside and you can be like 100% KSP?
Oh, I should maybe correct myself. So we are 100% KSP.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. Okay, my bad. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I was just saying that we support both in Showcase.
Okay,
so if you want to still use Capt, but we are completely on KSP. We're not using Capt anymore. And again, like Eli deserves all the credit for it.
And I mean, like, I guess just maybe just high empirical or kind of observationally speaking, anecdotally speaking, and you've noticed a huge improvement in performance. So there is, because I think, whenever any kind of tool comes out, there's always a bit of entropy resistance to adopt it because, oh yeah, sure, this is going to be the best thing ever, right?
Right.
And obviously there's always, not necessarily sunk cost fallacy, but there is investment in current systems and always that ROI on, okay, if we switch to the new thing, when are we going to see improvements? Is it going to be worth the developer hours we put into it? Do you feel like that there's a strong case for that? And would you, I know it depends on the project and the person, but would you encourage other people to kind of be more proactive about adopting KSP after your experiences?
I think so. And part of the reason why I would say that is because they have the advantage of always comparing themselves to CAP. And so when you start...
It's very fair.
Yeah, when you start with that, you won't launch unless you've hit that mark.
Yeah.
And so, and that also, like, that project baked for a very long time. Like, they let it marinate properly before announcing a stable release.
Yeah.
So that certainly helped. And that's why I feel very bullish that if you have the possibility of adopting KSP, you should absolutely do it.
Awesome. There was one other thing. So, you built Showcase around previews, and I guess just inside baseball a little bit for non-Android devs. There have been a lot of really interesting improvements. I mean, I think in general, I've been excited about the whole preview system in general, like just hearing it, especially compared to our old system. But, I think recently at Android Developer Summit last year, they announced a lot of like extra pizzazz, like extra functionality, extra, being able to, in the same preview, change different parameters so that you can see light mode, dark mode, different screen sizes easily. Is that something that can integrate well with Showcase? Is that something that you're going to have to actively, kind of work with, and how are your feelings about it?
Right. So we actually did add support for multi-previews, which is what you were referencing. So Showcase does support that. What I'm more excited about is that feature was added via a contributor. So Odin contributed that feature, and he does not work at Airbnb. But I'm more proud about the fact that someone could take a meaningfully difficult feature, spend time with me in discussing it, brainstorming it, and we were able to successfully get it merged in the open source project. And everyone that uses Showcase benefits from it. Yeah. And that's the beauty of open source.
Yeah.
That we didn't even know each other before that interaction, and we were able to successfully get together, plan it out, and ship it and merge it in the latest release of Showcase.
I love that again, and I've probably talked about this in other interviews, and if you talk to an Android dev, we probably kind of bore you to death about it, but the community and that kind of give and take of open source has been such a really important part of how we work. And even like, I think to kind of tie it back to Kotlin, adoption of different technologies like Kotlin, like KSP, are enhanced and improved and sped up by efforts like that. So that is a really great story, and it's really awesome that Showcase is an open source library that we all can take advantage of, and which you should if you're an Android developer using Compose. Thank you so much for speaking with me. If people wanted to find you on the internet, where can they do that?
Awesome. So my handle everywhere on the internet is Vinay GABA. Just my first name and my last name. I obviously like to keep things simple. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and obviously you should watch Vinay's talk whenever it comes out. I am going to, because of course I missed it because I was here, and he had to come running up right after his talk for me. But it's going to be definitely number one on my watch list and on my integration list.
We appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was really awesome having you, and thank you again for joining us. And we'll see you real soon. Bye.